Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. We're still aspiring to be viral. We're way over caffeinated tonight, and now we're a proudly sponsored weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and a team that may have found some quarterback answers but has questions elsewhere on the roster. I'm Eric Hansen in South Bend and trying to keep my phone from pinging. He's Tyler James in LaPorte, Indiana, and trying to avoid an orange out. Together, we are the word salad avoiding content creators and schematic fixers at our new home, blueandgold.com. On tonight's show, all you need is love. Well, it might be a better song lyric than football philosophy. We'll dig into that because Marcus Freeman has bigger fish to fry during this early bye week. We'll walk you down the road to redemption, maybe give you a little recruiting, some Pro Football Focus film grades, and your questions, so start filling up the portal. This is
Football Never Sleeps.
I'm fired up.
I don't know how you hit that outro so well after how little sleep we had last night, but you really nailed it. We appreciate it.
I'll tell you, before you get into your promo, the new way to do that is let your phone battery go down to 0. That's what happened today. Like, why did people stop calling me?
That's funny. Yeah, as Eric mentioned, Football Never Sleeps is presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Huddle up, football fans. Tailgate season is here, and nobody gets you ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find everything you need, from grills to jerseys and more. Be a watch party legend with gear from top brands like Nike and Under Armour, all at unbeatable prices every day. With 8 Academy stores across Indiana and a new store coming soon to Mishawaka, fun can't lose and neither can you. Gear up today at Academy Sports and Outdoors. Welcome in to all of our live viewers. We appreciate you spending some time with us on your Labor Day. Hope you've had a relaxing Labor Day. And please, as I alluded to, bear with us as we're a bit sleep deprived following last night's game. If you're watching us on replay, thank you. We hope everyone hits the like button, subscribes to the channel. It's nice to see some faces. I see people saying that Mike Singer sent them over from the Blue and Gold channel, so we appreciate that. Hopefully they had a good show with Robbie Toma tonight. We got a lot of cool YouTube stuff going on between the two channels for Blue and Gold, and we appreciate all the support. We're trying to get to 5,000 subscribers, and we're inching closer by the day. So if you subscribe to us, comment on what we're doing, share our videos with fellow Notre Dame fans, that helps us out a lot. Lastly, if you haven't joined us over at blueandgold.com yet, new subscribers can sign up for an annual subscription with a $1 trial for the first week. That will get you access to everything we write, our growing community on the Loose Emoji board, and our talented teammates who keep churning out content even when they're stranded in airports. I know Sunday night wasn't the result you wanted as Notre Dame fans, but we're going to have every angle of the aftermath covered in the coming days over at blueandgold.com.
All right. So our opening drive tonight is what Notre Dame's road to redemption should look like after the 27-24 loss at Miami on Sunday night. The answer starts with maximizing this bye week and making the most of it ahead of a September 13th home opener with a ranked Texas A&M team, and that becomes a must-win right now. So we'll break down what that means a little bit more in detail. But let's look at the most urgent fixes, Tyler. And it's not CJ Carr, who I think got better as the game went on and finished with the second highest Pro Football Focus film grade among Notre Dame's offensive players. The young man who caught his first touchdown pass and his first pass, period, on a first down conversion, Micah Gilbert was number 1 rated. So more on Carr later. Tyler, let's get to the stuff that needs to be fixing. As you fixed caffeine, as you think back to watching the game live and looking over the Pro Football Focus grades, which we do usually Sunday, this time Monday. What struck you when you looked at those?
Yeah, first, I'm glad I'm not responsible for fixing anything. I'm just here to talk about it. But
we're not responsible, but we have suggestions, and I know you guys do too.
To me, the biggest thing that stands out, and I think it was both evident in watching the game and in the PFF grades. I know PFF grades are certainly debatable and not gospel by any means. But too many of Notre Dame's defensive leaders and captains weren't a big enough part of the solution on Sunday night. 4 starters were among the 6 lowest PFF grades. 2 of those guys are captains, Drake Bowen and Donovan Heinisch, and Leonard Moore is a preseason All-American. So to have those guys at the bottom of your list in terms of guys who were graded out at performing poorly, that's not a winning recipe for Notre Dame. And is Notre Dame not putting those guys in good situations? I think that this debate. I think it's different for every single individual. So I don't know that we can lump them all together. I think Leonard Moore had some up and down moments. He gets when you look at the grades, he gets tabbed with the crazy touchdown catch by CJ Daniels, which if Adon Schuler helped him in any significant way, probably isn't a touchdown. But he did get beat on that and just didn't get help on the back end, and CJ Daniels made an incredible catch. In my personal opinion, I thought the linebackers were asked to do too much. I think everyone would agree that the defensive line didn't generate enough pressure or even get enough penetration against the run. And it felt like the secondary was giving up some easy completions and then broke a couple too many times for touchdowns in key moments. But that's all.
Okay.
Just that's all that was wrong with the defense.
Well, you didn't want to lump things, so let's unlump things a little bit here. We're going to start with the defense because I think when we look at Texas A&M, the next team on the schedule, Texas A&M's offense is way better than its defense, so the urgency is on defense for me. The major difference, we had Mike Golick Sr. on our Notre Dame senior alumni show that I co-hosted with Chuck Freeby a couple weeks ago. And he was talking about Chris Ash's philosophy and where it's maybe different than Al Golden. And he talks about an over front scheme. And basically the concept there is that the defensive linemen are mostly supposed to absorb blocks. And then that leaves the linebackers free to roam and make plays. Now that doesn't mean that defensive linemen need to just be statues and do nothing, although that may have looked like that at different points last night, but that is the concept. So with this change in philosophy, Tyler, do you think A, it's a good change long-term, B, go back to the old way, or C, it's just going to take some time to work through now that we know what it looks like in a game, now you can fix it?
I guess where I would start with that is that I don't have a firm enough grasp on what Notre Dame did differently in terms of the things you're referencing, like the overfront. That wasn't something that I had charted or have access to that information offhand. So I'm not sure how differently it was. Obviously, the results seemed very different. I don't know that I feel confident less than 24 hours after kickoff to know how different Notre Dame's scheme was last night versus the majority of the Al Golden tenure. It seemed to me that Miami's offensive line was winning at the point of attack, and I don't think that is scheme related. It seemed like physicality and wanting to set the tone were priorities for Miami's offense, where, as we'll get into later, it didn't seem like that those were priorities for Notre Dame's offense. And so I think Miami sort of leaned on that when it needed to. I think it got conservative in the second half with a lead, and Notre Dame knew what was coming and maybe made some adjustments as well. And I think that sort of limits and skews the statistics so it looks like, well, Notre Dame's run defense wasn't that bad, but that's not what it felt like watching the game. So I like I said, I don't feel confident enough to say, hey, this is what they were doing and this is what they need to do better in terms of how the defensive front was lining up and who was responsible for what gaps or absorbing blocks or making tackles. I would just say as a whole, I don't think the front seven did a good enough job, although I thought the linebackers were better than the defensive linemen. But I think even then, I don't know that either position group were making significant plays consistently enough. What did you think?
I thought, when I looked at, both live and when I looked at the film grades, I mean, the top 3 performers were Kingston Viliamu-Asa, Jalen Sneed, and Jaden Osbury. Drake Bowen was subpar, so he struggled with it. When you look at the players on the bottom, you reference us. Donovan Heinisch is down there. Josh Burnham is pretty low on the list. Jason Onye, who supposedly had a great August, according to Marcus Freeman. It is interesting to look at those, and I think that Marcus Freeman says question everything, and I think you do need to kind of do some self-scouting and say, okay, what worked with the scheme? How can we get better with the scheme? I don't think you can just strike it up to Miami had really good offensive linemen, because Texas A&M has really good offensive linemen. Northern Illinois did this to Al Golden's scheme last year. So Notre Dame has a history of being able to find fixes to these kinds of things. Sometimes it's health. This team wasn't about health, although Jordan Botello only played 9 snaps. But I do think that there's some schematic fixes that they can get to that's going to help them. And I think this bye week comes at a good time to address that. Do we want to play the Marcus Freeman clip now?
We can do that, sure.
Okay, we weren't in Miami's locker room or in the locker room in Hard Rock Stadium to record this. This is Fighting Irish Media, so we appreciate getting to use their clip. This is posted on Twitter/X, and let's roll the tape. And Tyler just disappeared, so I'm going to try to roll the tape while he comes back to us. Let's see if we can get this going here.
I don't care if you didn't play a snap or you played every down. I don't care if you're a coordinator, if you're a position coach, or if you're a GA, it doesn't matter. Everybody point the finger at themselves and said, what could we have done to make sure that we achieved the outcome we want? And that's what we'll do, right? Stay together. We got the best leadership, and this is when leadership has to show, right? Keep us together. We got to go to work. I'm not saying continue to do the same. We got to find different ways and better ways to do it. We can't beat Notre Dame, and we know there was plays in that game we beat Notre Dame, right? Credit to them. It's a good team. Top 10 battle, we lost by 3. Okay, we lost by 3. Okay, the first game of the season, right? We got a good ball team. I sat there and watched. I said, okay, we had to go through a little bit of the bumps in the road, but we got a good ball team. But we got to get back to work, right? This taste of pain, it hurts, the embarrassment, okay? We got to use this as we go back to work. We're going to go back to work, right? Stay together, man.
Again, Fighting Irish Media, great clip. Tyler, do you want to dig a little bit deeper into the defense, or do you want to go to some questions now and work some of those in?
Let's get a little bit more of the defense, and then we can get some defensive questions in, and then I know we have plenty of questions about the offense as well.
Okay. So do you think Notre Dame did a good job of rotating personnel last night?
I didn't think that rotation was that big of an issue. I think there were certain guys that I, based off of the way they played, would have argued could or should have played more. Kingston Viliamu-Asa probably being at the top of that list. Seemed like Jared Dawson was probably the best interior defensive lineman for Notre Dame. But maybe not. I'm not worried about like play him out for Kingston Viliamu-Asa, but Jared Dawson, maybe he doesn't play as well if you asked him to play 20 more snaps. So maybe that was the right amount that he needed to play at that level. Bryce Young, did he play enough? I mean, people last night on the board were asking us, hey, is Bryce Young playing? And I was like, well, he is. He's not really making as big of an impact as we would suggest. And I think
some of it's the number thing.
The number, yeah. I thought
that
too.
called me this morning. Where's the number 30? I said he's 95.
Yeah. So folks didn't remember the number change. So I try to remind folks of that. But he played 31 snaps. The thing that stood out to me was he only had 13 pass rush snaps. And that was compared to 23 for Boubacar Traore. That doesn't seem like enough to me. And then the thing in terms of someone who played maybe too much, it felt like, and a little bit of second guessing is like, why did Carson Hobbs play so much? And it seemed to bite Notre Dame in the butt when he did. Like Notre Dame, he was getting targeted and wasn't able to keep up with Malachi Tony, which is not an easy task. And that was an unfortunate situation for him. I like not similar because Jaden Mickey didn't play as much, but it kind of similar to when Jaden Mickey got thrown in the game in Al Golden's first game as defensive coordinator against Ohio State. He gets run out there, and then all of a sudden Ohio State gets a big touchdown with that double safety blitz that everyone so fondly remembers. So I thought that's one thing, stepping back from the rotation, and maybe this is better later, but like I think people are more fondly remembering Al Golden's debut as defensive coordinator based on the rest of his tenure. So I think we have to keep that in perspective. Like maybe Chris Ash is going to get better than his first performance as Notre Dame's defensive coordinator. And Al Golden wasn't able to get a lot of pressure on CJ Stroud that night at Ohio State. And that came back to bite Notre Dame as well.
Yeah, Notre Dame did not force a turnover. They led the country in turnovers forced last year. However, in Al Golden's tenure, they did not get their first turnover forced until Game 4 of that 2022 season.
Were there any personnel rotation things that I didn't mention that you wanted to hit on?
Well, I'm excited when we get to see more of Jordan Botelho. I thought a dozen or fewer snaps was the right move with him coming back and having missed so much time. I saw one rep where Boubacar and Botelho were the edge players. They were out there together. I kind of liked that look. I thought they'd go a little bit deeper on the defensive line, but again, I'm not sure that was necessarily the answer. Are you going to get more from Cole Mullins and Elijah Hughes, for example? So I'm not sure that was necessarily the answer. When I look at the defensive backs, Leonard Moore and Christian Gray played all but one snap, and the one snap that Mark Zachary played was when Christian Gray came down on I guess it was the left shoulder, and was out for a play, and Mark Zachary came in for a play, and then Christian Gray went back in. But it surprised me a little bit, Tyler, just given the humidity and the conditions down there. It'll be something that's interesting to watch moving forward. And they're going to need their depth against Texas A&M, who's, again, a really good offense. That's where the strength of their team is. They've got two new wide receivers from the portal that are really good. Casey Concepcion is one of them. Marcel Reed looked really good at quarterback. They have a very experienced offensive line. Their issues, strangely enough, are on their defensive line after you think about how good they were last year. So, Tyler, what do you think is the answer to creating more pressure? I think you had a stat from how few pressures Notre Dame and how long it's been since they've generated that few in a game. So why don't you reveal that and then give me your answer. Give me your picks.
Yeah, well, that stat was quickly expired, as I probably should have expected with Pro Football Focus updating its grades and stuff. At last night when I was quoting it, Notre Dame was only credited with 4 defensive pressures against Miami, and that was the fewest pressures Notre Dame had against an opposing team since Navy in 2017, when Navy had 9 dropbacks. But at last look, I think it goes up to 11. I think I have PFF open here, so let me see if it's changed from that. So that's a significant difference. I don't know how two people differ so much in terms of how it could be 4 and 11 in less than 24-hour span, but that is what the difference that it's been. It's at 11 right now. So it wasn't historically bad as it was portrayed to be from that stat, but it still was not good enough.
It was not good enough. And that's one thing Marcus Freeman mentioned in the post game, and I think he's going to get involved in some of the answers there. So if you're Chris Ash and Mark Freeman, is the bye week more A&M specific, giving yourself more time to create wrinkles, maybe some surprises for them, or are you looking long term and trying to find fixes that are going to help you throughout the season, or some kind of balance with that?
I mean, I think it has to be all of the above. I think A&M has to be at the forefront, though. I mean, you can't lose this game. If you want to make the playoff, you lose almost all of your leverage if you lose the first 2 games of the season for Notre Dame this year. And so the focus has to be on stopping A&M. I don't see – I mean, it seems silly to me that Notre Dame couldn't come up with a game plan that had tenets that would be applicable for the rest of the season. Now, sure, you might not be facing a quarterback like Marcel Reed on a weekly basis, but I think there's probably some similarities in terms of what you were doing with preparing for Miami's offense that you can sharpen up that would apply to future opponents. So I think certainly you would want to make wrinkles and adjustments that can help you throughout the season. But first and foremost, it has to be winning this game. You can't afford to lose it. So I think that's why that has to be the priority.
Okay, let's get away from my boring questions and get to some experts over here in our chat.
All right. Paul Kinlan said, question, our DBs used to fly around. Who clipped our wings?
I'm not sure that the wings were clipped. I'm not sure. The guy that I was surprised, and maybe I'm not answering your question, Paul, directly, but I'm surprised Adon Schuler wasn't more active and more of a leader in the back end of the defense, more active. Jalen Stroman actually graded out pretty well. The new safety from Virginia Tech, the grad transfer who missed most of the last season with an injury. He had led Notre Dame in tackles. He had a pretty decent Pro Football Focus film grade. I'm not sure about the rest of them. If you're referencing Luke Talich, Tay Johnson, those guys rotated in, but Adon Schuler to me was the guy I expected more from in the opener.
Yeah, I would agree. Felt the absence of Xavier Watts, who I think someone mentioned maybe on our podcast. It's like, hey, are we not accounting for how good Xavier Watts was in terms of trying to assume what this defense is going to be like? He was a playmaker, and Notre Dame didn't have a playmaker in the secondary. Adon Schuler had one instance to maybe make a play that could have completely changed the outcome of the game, and he didn't. He sort of sat back and waited for it rather than be aggressive, which I know it's a tough spot because DBs have to be careful in terms of where they're launching when the ball's in the air and stuff like that. But I'm sure he wants that rep back. He had a couple missed tackles, I think, throughout the game too. So yeah, I think they're just Notre Dame's secondary, I think, was playing on its heels a bit and giving Miami some stuff. And then it's hard to run with Malachi Toney, as Carson Hobbs learned. And as I think the nation learned last night with the way he played, Leonard Moore was able to keep him a little more in check when they put him on him in the second half. But
well, the A&M tough matchups are the slot and the field receiver. I mean, those are the tough matchups. So Notre Dame's got to have a good plan for that.
All right. Let me see. Kevin M said, is the moral of the story don't pay attention to any narratives? Didn't feel like any of the pregame one talk was accurate, both bad and good.
I would say beware of the narratives, but I think, you report on the things that you know and you analyze and so forth. I mean, again, if you're dumping the potential of this team based on a road loss at a top 10 team, I think that's an overreaction. And last year we saw how an early loss doesn't necessarily tell the tale of what's in store for a team. And so I think there are things in training camp that give you maybe mirages that you got to watch out for and not overstate things. And that's why I'm always very against over extrapolating little things that I see in a drill and trying to say, well, this means this is what's going to happen for the rest of the season. But big picture, I still have high hopes for this team. I think that the problems are fixable. And I think the best news that came out of the game is that the quarterback is probably ahead of schedule from where I thought he'd be and maybe where Notre Dame thought he'd be. you look around at the other young quarterbacks' debuts, and few of them had as tough a debut as CJ Carr did. Now, Sayin from Ohio State and Arch Manning also had really difficult defenses to face. But I'd say CJ Carr, I'm really encouraged about how they can leverage that into helping their offense get better quickly. So that's where I stand on that.
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of whose narratives we're talking about. Like some Miami fans, and I don't mind if they're retweeting stuff or responding to stuff, but someone was like, I thought you guys had 8 defensive tackles. And I was like, who said that? Like, I just like, why should I be responsible for someone's bad take? Like, and I think he just wanted to talk smack. I don't think he was like directing that at me, but, it's hard to keep, there's so many people that have platforms that it's hard to keep track of whose narratives are the ones of record. And
we don't even agree with each other on this show sometimes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we don't have.
I trash talk Tyler as soon as that camera's off.
I tell him he's got to do it before the camera turns off. It'd be much better ratings. So I mean, I guess from my perspective, in terms of what we project coming into a season, like, you have to understand, we saw so much more of Notre Dame in meaningful moments last night than we've seen the last 6 months. Like, it's not even, it's night and day. Like, the best thing you're going to have to judge someone on is an actual game. If we were to get more practice access, then maybe we could feel more firmly about what we're seeing or knowing is going on behind the scenes. But we're projecting based on things we hear. We try to be right. We can't guarantee. I mean, also, this is sports. Like, you can think you know what's going to happen, and it doesn't always happen. But also, like, game one is always, doesn't matter what the outcome is, people are going to overreact because that's all you've seen. Like, everyone now has had a chance to see something, and it's just as much, it's not that much less than what we've seen. So now we continue to form more opinions about things. Like, obviously, we thought Notre Dame would be able to run the football better than it did. It didn't do that. We thought Notre Dame would be able to pressure the quarterback better than it did, and it didn't do that. So I think this is just one data point. Like, I don't think this is – everyone who says we were wrong from the preseason is just as likely to be wrong for saying they know everything about this team off of one game. Like, I think you got to be measured in what you're reacting to and how you're forming your opinions off of what you see and what could be coming moving forward. And that's what we're trying to illuminate in our discussion tonight.
One thing is, too, with the bottom line is, I think even Notre Dame pulled that game out. Let's say the kicker hooks that field goal, Davis, for Miami, it stays a tie game, Notre Dame wins in overtime. I think there'd still be a lot of things to fix. I know fans would feel a lot better about it, but I think you'd still have the same problems to address at this point, the same data points and so forth. But here's the thing about narratives, too. I mean, when you saw our score predictions, I can't remember yours, but I know it was similar to mine. I said 24-17 Notre Dame. Notre Dame scored 24 points. Miami scored 27. And I think the difference there is the two turnovers. Now, Miami didn't cash in on that first turnover, but I do think the turnover margin made the difference in the game. And I wouldn't have expected Notre Dame to lose the turnover margin. That's maybe my biggest miscalculation, but I still feel good about the long-term potential of this team.
Yeah, my score was 24-20. So yeah, I guess at least nailed Notre Dame's total, but it definitely didn't play out in the way that I thought the game would play out. I didn't think that Notre Dame would fall behind like that and then mount a comeback in the way it did. Bob Alvey, who said who had the most snaps at linebacker, I can answer that real quick. Drake Bowen had 57 snaps, so he led the linebackers.
Out of how many? 70?
Leonard Moore had 70, so unless Leonard Moore missed a play, I think
it is 70.
I think it was 70. Let's see where
the other guys are all at the top.
How many times did we blitz or put pressure on back 5 or 6? That was from Time to Grind.
You can look that up in Pro Football Focus, can't you?
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
Okay. I'll tell you what, Beck seemed to handle Notre Dame's pressure really well. He even got I mean, even when there was the rare times there were pressure in his face, he handled it pretty well. That was the 2023 version of Carson Beck. It'll be interesting to see if other teams are able to have more success in terms of rattling him, but he was really, really focused. He played a really good game. The interesting thing about it was when you look at the pass efficiency grades, CJ Carr was within 1 point of Carson Beck's grade.
So the answer, according to Pro Football Focus, is 13 dropbacks for Beck were blitzed. He had a 46.2 completion percentage on those dropbacks. When he was not blitzed, which was on 19 dropbacks, he completed 82.4% of his passes. So that illuminates the difference between what Notre Dame was able to do with a 4-man rush versus 5 or 6.
And I'm going to credit Matt Freeman from Irish Sports Daily from this one, what they got from PFF. CJ Carr, when he was blitzed, was 11 for 15 for 91 yards and a touchdown.
All right. Irish fan, what do you guys think about the timing of this first bye this year? As a fan, I wish we had a game this weekend.
Yeah, I think with a Sunday night game, I think this was smart. I think Notre Dame needed it between two ranked teams, and with the Sunday night road game, I think it would have been bad to have this as a short week for a team like Texas A&M. If you're playing Purdue or playing Alabama A&M or somebody like that, that's a different story. But Texas A&M, I think you need the extra week. I'll take the bye week here.
Yeah, I would agree with you. We Are Not Marshall says, name 5 teams that Notre Dame had to beat to get Chris Ash. He was selling tires in Toledo until Freeman rang.
I'm not even sure how to answer that. So are we competing against Bell Tire, Discount Tire?
My answer would be like, who was fighting for Al Golden when Marcus Freeman hired Al Golden? I don't think he was a hot college defensive coordinator name. I don't know that his name was mentioned in searches at that time.
I think we just need to mellow out a little bit on Chris Ash. I could see you being upset about it. To say that he's not going to be the answer eventually, I think it's too early. Again, Al Golden, his first few games, there were a lot of people that weren't really enamored with him either. And I can remember answering those emails and then and on my live chats. And at the end, he wins the Broyles Award. I'm not saying Chris Ash is going to win the Broyles Award, but people I think a lot of in football have a very high opinion about Chris Ash and like this hire. And sometimes I'm willing to outsource my optimism based on their expertise.
Tom Frawley says, why weren't the younger, bigger D linemen given more of a look in fall camp? Freeman needs to gut check both lines, find out who wants to play with physicality.
I think in the practices that we were in, we did see some of the bigger linemen get. Sean Sevillano got some reps, again, in the very limited practices we were in. I'm not trying to extrapolate too far because we saw one practice of 11 on 11, and it was the first practice. We did see a few competitive periods with the backup. Sometimes Sean Sevillano and Elijah Hughes and Armel Mookum and guys like that, Cole Mullins, were parts of those. It was kind of the threes versus the threes to open up the partial practices that we saw. I think they looked at everybody, and I think they'll continue to look at everybody. And I do think that there are certain opponents where playing with size, and Sean Sevillano has a burst. I was surprised Elijah Hughes beat him out for that third spot at nose tackle. So I think that's an interesting question and something Notre Dame will look at, especially against certain opponents.
Yeah, I think people are size obsessed too often. And just because
and justifiably so in their defense when they see Notre Dame getting pushed back as often as they were in that game. I'm not saying that's the answer. Yeah, size doesn't solve everything, but they do. I think that's a legitimate question to ask.
Right. I just think, like, if they really thought that those guys couldn't hold up, they wouldn't be out there. It's not like, well, we just love smaller guys. We want them out there. We want to see them get pushed around so then we can put the bigger guys in. I think there was faith in those guys who played, and they didn't have the success that they were expected to. I thought it's important to mention here, Chris Ash was not selling tires in Toledo. He was a scout in the NFL. I didn't make that clarification.
Coaching DBs in the years between Texas and that scouting job with Jacksonville this past year.
Correct. So I felt like we probably did a disservice by not at least pointing that out.
Well, I just was, it was a creative way to phrase the question, and I was trying to be creative back, but I failed. Maybe
Bob
we
Alvey
need
says,
a bigger guy answering that question.
Bob Alvey said, was the great defensive unit in fall practice more due to poor offense and offensive line?
I don't think so, because a lot of these guys were pretty good players last year. If Al Golden's scheme were still in place, would they have had a better performance last night? Tyler?
I think so.
I would agree. They would have familiarity with it. And I remember with Al Golden too, him saying, okay, we had to keep things more basic in this first year until everybody learned it. And then we were able to give the 2.0 and the 3.0 as the players learned the system. And they were able to become a sophisticated NFL type defense that everybody knew what they were doing over time. I'm not saying Chris Ash's defense is as sophisticated, but he has that NFL influence in him. I need to see more. I was disappointed with the first game, what it looked like, and yet I need to see more before I, throw my hat one way or another on him.
Yeah, I think we didn't hear that the offenses were lighting it up. And so I think, and obviously the offenses were going through its own growing pains with using 2 first-time potential starters and going through that whole situation. So I think the defense had the advantage in camp because of that and more experience. I don't know if it was necessarily because the offense wasn't that good. But I think there's probably something to that. Like, I don't think, I don't have the sense that CJ Carr was as consistently good throughout the whole fall camp as he was last night. So I think there were things that the offense was working on that were going to make them be a little bit more, be not as potent as maybe you'd want them to be to test your defense.
Well, let me ask you something too, Tyler. When Northern Illinois beat Notre Dame, there were people asked, hey, did we underestimate, is Northern Illinois going to be one of those teams that hangs around in the bottom of the top 25? And they ended up not being that team. But they were an experienced team, and they leaned into that experience, and they had a good game plan. What I want to ask you is Miami better than we thought? Now, I have to vote in tomorrow's top 25, and I have Miami penciled into a spot. There's only 2 teams left playing tonight, so the winner of that game could possibly leap over them. I don't think that's going to happen in my mind, unless North Carolina or TCU wins 112-0. But do you think Miami might be a top 5 team?
They are right now. I think.
Do you like the long-term potential of them being able to stand up and play their schedule and be a team that improves? Or do you like the pieces that you saw last night enough to say, man, maybe they're better than what we thought?
Yeah, I think some of the questions we had about Miami going into the game are still question marks. Like, CJ Daniels made one incredible play, but can they count on that? Like, is that something that's going to happen consistently? And Malachi Toney was really needed for them to get the ball moving consistently in the passing game. So how much help will Carson Beck have from the receiver position there? I think is still a question. But if Miami can protect Carson Beck that well, I think that offense has a lot of potential, and I think that if they can run the ball the way they did, I do think Miami looked like a good team to me. I thought both teams had bright moments, and both teams had certainly poor moments as well, which you come to expect in week 1 games anymore. It seems like, especially with two like talented teams going against each other, it seems like they sort of lower their level of play a little bit coming out of the gate. But yeah, I do think Miami could be good, and that could be a real. It's not necessarily a blight. It's going to be a blight on Notre Dame's resume moving forward.
Okay. Do we want to go to offense now, or do you have some more questions you need to get to on defense before we move on?
I had this one more question from Pat Subkowski on defense, and then we can go over to offensive questions. Traore impressed me, but other than that, the defensive line wasn't good. What changes do you see on the defensive line, particularly the interior, pairing different guys together?
I think you could look at that. I mean, Rubio and Anye can play either position. I think Dawson and Heinisch are best suited for where they are, but Heinisch has played defensive tackle before. But I think there's times and some packages where I like Boubacar Traore and Botello on the edges when Botello's fully healthy, and then you kick maybe Bryce Young inside and get another burst from a big 6'7", 270 body in that pass rush. I think that might be kind of a NASCAR package that I'd like to see.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would start with wanting to know what they're trying to get out of the defensive lineman. If this overfront is such a change up, and that is something that Notre Dame is leaning on more. How do they? What's the goal for each individual position? I don't know that I have a good enough grasp on that, because Chris Ash was not discussing that at any length in interviews prior to the season. Now, I don't know that we'll get many specifics as it relates to that moving forward, but maybe we can get more information on that. I think Jared Dawson showed that he can make a difference in certain ways. He was a handle sometimes. I think I'm not sure that there's going to be huge shakeups in terms of who plays. I think they're just going to have to improve and get better and figure out what they were doing wrong and why it wasn't working. I don't see necessarily a guy that wasn't used as being the guy that's going to unlock Notre Dame's defensive line. Maybe those guys just need to get used to playing with each other a little bit more, because the combinations aren't necessarily consistent to what they've been in the past, and they got to figure out how to do better.
Okay, we're going to take a look at the offense. We're going to pick up the tempo, so we're going to have a little bit shorter answers to these, and hopefully I won't ramble on the questions. All you need is Love. The junior played 47 of the 60 offensive snaps, but had fewer carries with 10 than CJ Carr's 11. He did catch 4 passes, but strictly with the run game, do you think this was a one-off cranking up this offense, and that's why we didn't see more of him? Or is this something that we have to be concerned about, not having enough Love? Or maybe that shouldn't be part of the game plan. What's your thought?
Well, that last part is absolute nonsense.
It is absolute nonsense. But I did see it in the chat, so I thought I'd throw that in there just for that person.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't totally understand the game plan. I do get like giving CJ Carr some easy throws early, but it's like, okay, well, we don't have to keep doing this thing over and over again and just allowing the DBs to tee off on what you're doing. So because of my lack of understanding of what the plan was last night, I'm not sure that I can anticipate where it's going to go from here. I would be surprised if Notre Dame doesn't make a more concerted effort to get the ball to its running backs. It certainly was surprising how it played out on Sunday night. Why was it so RPO heavy? Is that really like CJ Carr's best strength? To what advantage is that giving Notre Dame? And are Notre Dame's receivers so good at wide receiver screens that you need to get them the ball in those ways? Like, that was perplexing to me. I'm not sure if I'm totally convinced of this idea. I mean, it's probably not true at all, but I wonder, like, is this a game plan that was starting to be cobbled together with Kenny Minchie in mind? Like the amount that CJ Carr was running, like I just feel like there are a lot of different things that was going on within the offense that I don't know that I would have expected CJ Carr to be at the helm of. What about you?
I'm going to agree with your answer and move to the next one so we can get to some more of these. Okay, not a very deep rotation of running backs last night. I figured we'd see more two-back formations. What are your thoughts about that moving forward, incorporating more two-backs as a possible strength of this team?
They need blocking help, whether it's a back or a tight end. Someone's got to do it. So I don't know what the answer is, but it wasn't the tight ends last night. Eli Raridon did not play well as a blocker.
Okay, let's go back to the tight ends then. Notre Dame had nobody but Eli Raridon having played in that game at tight end. Pro Football Focus had 1 rep for Ty Washington, so we'll get to the bottom of that. But either way, you didn't see any Larson, any Flanagan, James Flanagan, that is. Cooper Flanagan's not back. So what's your thoughts? Why would Notre Dame, especially against a physical front like that, just play one tight end? What's your thoughts?
They don't trust the other guys. I don't know that there's another explanation for that. I mean, maybe Ty Washington is banged up. Mike Denbrock alluded to, was it a hand injury or something that he was dealing with? Wrist injury. So maybe that played a role. But someone else has to be ready. I know Notre Dame has suffered from injuries and the depth chart is depleted, and we didn't think it was going to be the strongest room on Notre Dame's offense, but they got to figure out some other things because wide receivers were being put in positions where they had to block on the goal line just because it didn't seem like they trusted other tight ends to go out there.
Well, it seems like a second running back would make some sense. Maybe we talked about this on the post-game show last night with Bob Morton, Mike Singer on their post-game show on the Blue and Gold channel. Is this a time to get a jumbo guy like Will Black involved and make him a quasi tight end? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, if I don't care who it is, as long as they can block. If you're putting them in there,
well, he's big, he can block, and he's athletic. I mean, he's a guy that has played some tight end.
Yeah,
just kind of like Joe Alt did in the early 2021. They had that jumbo package.
Yeah, so yeah, if that's the best guy to do that, I don't care if he was recruited as an offensive lineman. If you don't have a tight end who can block, you need to get someone in there that can.
Okay, well, poor CJ Carr, it takes him 3/4 of the show to get a whole lot of mention because he wasn't the problem. Let's look at CJ Carr. What can Mike Denbrock add to his mix to more fully take advantage of his skill set as Notre Dame gets into deeper in its schedule, gets into the Texas A&Ms and the Purdues and the Arkansas?
I would imagine he will get more downfield reads. He seemed to be making a lot of pre-snap reads on RPOs. And in a few situations was sort of I can't think of the word, but scrambling and making things happen, so improvising. And so I don't think you're going to build that into the offense, but maybe that allows you to believe that he's seeing the field well and can do that in the pocket rather than scrambling for his life.
The offensive line grades were really bad. Pass blocking, especially run blocking, was below par collectively and mostly individually, especially at tackle. Why do you think that happened, and what's the fix, especially at tackle?
Well, Miami has really good defensive ends. I think that played a big role in it.
Okay.
But Emil Wagner and Anthony Knapp played poorly. I think that's totally fair to say. I don't think that they played with aggression. They didn't dictate the tone. And that's something that they'll have to address. I don't think the play calling necessarily helped them in those situations too. But they got to do better.
Okay, Gerby Lambert and Sullivan Absher pretty much split the 60 reps. Gerby with 33, I think Sullivan at 27. So moving forward, Gerby, Absher, both.
I didn't see the benefit of rotating them. I thought Lambert played slightly better. I don't think either of them necessarily played particularly well. But Lambert seemed to move some guys a little bit better when he knew what he was doing. He needs to make sure that he's assignment sound, and that wasn't necessarily always the case.
As tough a night as Anthony Knapp had, he got hurt late or had a cramp late, and Styles Prescott comes in. So you have the red shirt version of Styles Prescott. Should Notre Dame have a better left tackle alternative if somebody comes out of the game like that than the red shirt version of Styles Prescott?
You'd like to. I think it's easier said than done. Like I'm not sure.
Well, Gerby Lambert would have been that person at some point, or would have been a tackle alternative. Will Black and Augustine also played a lot inside during camp, learning the guards, thinking that might be where they were needed more.
But I mean, look at last year until Charles Jagasa got healthy. Would Notre Dame Tosh Baker wasn't a quality backup? I don't think.
Correct.
I mean,
you're right.
So I don't think this isn't a one-off situation. So I think Matty Augustine is the next guy, in my opinion, from what we've seen and heard. I know people are pining for Will Black, and don't love him playing guard. But it seemed obviously Notre Dame's losing tackle depth options to guard competitions, but I think Styles Prescott was thrown in a terrible spot. Like, that's an incredibly difficult situation to everyone's playing at full speed in the game, and you're fresh off the bench. It's not an ideal situation, so probably not the best way to measure his potential either.
What would give you optimism about a surge from the offensive line in game 2, and did Aaron Taylor throw tomatoes at the TV?
I don't know. I wouldn't put that past him, but yeah, I mean, to me, I keep harping on it. Like, I think a better game plan that supports the strengths of the offensive line. And if then they're not able to do that, then I have greater concerns about what this offensive line can be. I still think there's questions now, but I think I have some belief that these guys will get things straightened out.
Some quick observations on the wide receivers.
They weren't involved enough. Jordan Faison was relied on early. Malachi Fields fumbled, and that marred his night. I thought Micah Gilbert did a nice job stepping in. Jaden Greathouse disappeared once again. That's too common of a theme for him. And then what happened to Will Pauling? I think we expected more from him than that. And I think a lot of that's based on what the plays that were being drawn up. I sound like a broken record, and it's not all at Mike Denbrock's fault, but I just don't know like who those guys didn't step up in opportunities that they were given. I mean, obviously we don't know where the ball could have gone on every throw, but they just didn't have a lot of opportunities. It didn't seem.
One more before we go to the question portal. Is Denbrock's play calling a necessary evolution or a bad night?
I'm not sure what you mean by that, but it was certainly a bad night.
Well, necessary evolution is that you've got a smaller playbook and you're breaking in a first-time quarterback, and that we'll see better versions of this going forward, that you couldn't throw too much at the quarterback in his first start. All right, let's go to the question portal for some more clarity on questions.
Eric Swope said, got to give CJ Carr a ton of credit for his guts. Which player surprised you the most in both a positive and negative light?
Surprised me the most in a positive light beyond CJ Carr, I would say Micah Gilbert, just off the top of my head. In a negative light, pretty much the whole offensive line. I'll grade them as a unit.
Yeah, I would say Jalen Stroman as a positive surprise, just because it was sort of a thought that he would be okay back there, but we hadn't really seen it, and I thought he played pretty well. In terms of a negative surprise, yeah, I think you could say any one of the offensive linemen. Probably Emil Wagner would be the biggest one for me. Bob Alvey says, can we please get Will back up to speed at left tackle? He has to have more upside. Naps pass pro under 30 on PFF after 15 starts last season. His injury and surgery is not an excuse.
Yeah, and I don't think he's using it as an excuse, but he has to be better than he was last night. I mean, that looked kind of like the freshman version of Anthony Knapp. I actually think he held up probably better in the Texas A&M game against a really good defensive line than he did last night. And he really had the whole offseason to work with Billy Schrauth, so you can't say, well, they're just not used to working together. So there needs to be some big improvement in week 2. And I can see why people are calling for Will Black. I mean, in talking with some sources that are at practice every day, Will Black is an impressive athlete. How quickly he'll be an impressive left tackle or right guard or whatever he's asked to be, or left guard, is another story, but he's a guy that has a future.
Yeah, I guess one thing we haven't brought up is, like, they were playing on the road in a loud environment. What were there issues with the cadence, and were Anthony Knapp and Emil Wagner not being able to fire off as well as they may need to handle the defensive ends that were playing against them? I think that would be something that we haven't discussed much. Eric and Tyler, seemed Lambert wasn't in sync with the rest of his O-line mates. Do you think the delay in choosing a right guard starter didn't give the O-line enough time to develop the needed chemistry?
When we've talked to Bob Morton and Aaron Taylor both about this, they've talked about game experience is so much more valuable than anything that you can do in practice. And yet I think there were times, Mike, when you saw in the game, Gerby Lambert didn't block the right person. There was maybe a combination block where he needed to pick up the nose guard. The nose guard came in untouched, basically. So I think there's probably something to that. He missed a lot of time in spring practice. He was cross-training at tackle and guard. But I do think if he can learn from his experience in the Miami game, he's going to be a much better right guard in the very next game. And I'm going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. And this bye week will help him.
Yeah, I think it probably didn't help, but I'm curious, like, is it a lack of, did he just not understand what he was supposed to do in those situations? Was it not communicated to him? We don't know the answer to that. If it wasn't communicated to him, then that's bad chemistry. If he just messed up on his own, then that's just him not being prepared. And whether or not he was the starter or not, he should be prepared for the assignments that he's given. Scott Fegan says, would the line improve if Lambert moved to left tackle and Knapp or Absher to right guard?
I don't think at this point that would be the right move. I mean, maybe in 2026 or something, but I don't think that that's where I would go right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I see a left tackle in Gerby Lambert right now. So that would be my answer. I don't think that would be the solution. Certainly, Anthony Knapp has to play better than he did last night. But I'm not sure that putting Gerby Lambert out at left tackle would fix all the problems. As Mickey Irish says, at some point, don't you think we need to play these O-linemen in the positions they were recruited for? Taking the best 5 isn't always best.
I think Harry Heastan, Joe Moore, and Joe Rudolph would say, hold my beer. They would say that they've had a lot of success with playing the best 5, and that's their job, is to get them to play in those positions. And I think that Lyman would agree with you. I mean, Notre Dame has guys that are playing in the pro football for a long time that learn to play other positions. Zach Martin is going to be a Hall of Fame guard, and he played left tackle at Notre Dame.
Right.
Quentin Nelson came to Notre Dame as a left tackle and is a really, really good guard. Nick Martin never played center in his life till he was at Notre Dame. Same with
Mustipher.
Mustipher and the kid from out California, Patterson.
Yeah.
So I will respectfully disagree on that.
Yeah, certainly recruiting, coaching staffs and recruiting staffs sort of have a belief of what a guy may or may not be, but they're not as pigeonholed into, like, this guy is a tackle and he's going to play tackle for us and we're going to make it happen. That's not reality, I don't think. Just because On3 or Rivals rate someone as a 5-star offensive tackle, that doesn't mean that Notre Dame is bound to play them at offensive tackle during their career. I think the coaches are paid to determine whether or not that makes the most sense for the unit. Now, that doesn't mean the coaching staff can't make mistakes and needs to do a better job at figuring out what your tackles need to be and what your guards need to be in their blocking schemes. But I don't think it's as black and white as some are portraying it to be.
And again, there's times like Jared Patterson. I remember talking to Coach Long about this when he was the offensive coordinator. That was supposed to be an experiment. let's see what he can do at center. He was so good on day one at center, they never moved him again until late in his career when Long wasn't the offensive coordinator.
Juan Manuel V says, is Price underrated? He looked like the better back yesterday. It's not the first time Price looks like RB1, even with Love. I wonder if Price gets the same amount of carries as Love, results better.
I was impressed with Price last night. I think he's really good. I think they're a really good combination. I would like to see more of a rotation. I'd like to see a little bit of Aeneas Williams too. Again, if this tight end issue is a long-term issue, then I'd like to see more two backs, and I'd like to see those guys out there together.
Yeah, I don't know the number offhand, but that drive, yes, the Price had success, but I don't think it was coincidence. It was that Notre Dame continued to run the football too. Like there was a one first down, they got like 2 yards, and then they needed 2 yards, and they got it. It's not like he was breaking off long runs every play, but they stuck with the run. I feel like they found something on that drive. Then Price fumbled, and then he isn't playing as much as a result of that. To me, it's not that Jadarian Price was the only one capable of doing those things. I think that was just a time in the game where Notre Dame was like, okay, let's establish this run. Let's get back to the running game. And then the next time the offense had the ball, they were down 2 scores. And so like, that's one of the kind of a similar situation as the Ohio State game in the championship game. Notre Dame couldn't run the ball as much as they wanted to because they got down more than they wanted to at certain points of the game. All right, I think that's all I have. I mean, I'm sure there's questions I missed, but those are all the ones I had starred in the question queue, Eric.
Okay, do we want to touch anything on recruiting? Is there anything going on?
I don't have anything. I don't know what's going on in recruiting other than Notre Dame.
They'll have guys in for Texas A&M, but it'll be 2027s, right?
Yes, and a lot of guys. My understanding, I don't know. I don't have the list memorized by any means, but I know Kyle Kelly and Mike Singer have been doing a good job of reporting those names over on the loose emoji board. It's an impressive list. So head over there. I'm sure we'll have plenty of coverage in the lead up to the game, but this will be a big recruiting opportunity for Notre Dame in the 2027 class.
Big live audience tonight. Thanks everybody for asking questions, making comments, and not throwing tomatoes unless you threw it at your own computer screen. We really appreciate you. We will have a Third and Gold podcast later in the week that'll be on YouTube. Even though this is a bye week, so be on the lookout for that. That'll drop on Thursday.
All right, everyone, have a good week.